Good evening to all of you all. On behalf of Kotak Alternate Asset Managers Limited, we welcome you to today's webinar on philanthropy in India, the impact of the ultra rich. And the name, we have named it like this because we intend to kind of communicate through our webinar how all of you all can create the relevant impact that we need to create. My name is Gautami Gavankar, and I'm pleased to be the moderator of this discussion. We have with us Ashish Dhawan. Ashish Dhawan is the founder and CEO of Convergence Foundation, and Ashish is also the founding chairperson for Ashoka University and the Central Square Foundation. Ashoka University, as you all know, was established as a university in 2014 and is already recognized as a leading teaching and research institute across the humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and data and computer sciences. Ashish also serves on the governing board of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Welcome, Ashish, and thanks for doing this for us. I know you have a very critical meeting starting 5:30, so really thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Gautami, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak with so many of your clients who are interested in this topic.
Ashish, we have decided that we will collaborate and ensure that philanthropy in India grows, right? So we are keeping up to.
That's our mission.
Yes. So, at the starting, I'll start asking some questions to Ashish and get the insights. But I would encourage all of you to participate in these discussions, ask questions and share your perspectives. Together, let's get into something which is transformational and change the philanthropic landscape in India. Just now, the webinar is only listen-only mode, and you can write the questions in the Q&A box. We will have a chance to have you all ask questions as well. So we will do that once we finish some of the questions that we have for Ashish. So Ashish, here it comes. You've been a prominent figure in the philanthropic landscape in India for many years. Could you share your insights on the key trends in philanthropy in India and how these have evolved over time? Specifically, what changes have you observed in motivations, strategies, and the impact of philanthropic efforts among Indians, UHNIs, and HNI community?
Well, thank you, Gautami. I think it's a very good question. I would say, firstly, to set the context, we have to thank stalwarts like Mr. Azim Premji, Nandan Nilekani, the Infosys founders, Shiv Nadar. They really set us on this journey because with the, and of course, in the past, the Tatas and others. So I think when Mr. Premji made his big announcement, I think philanthropy came of age in modern India. And that set us off on a new trend. And I observed 4 or 5 big trends thereafter. First is the ticket size has increased dramatically. I mean, you've seen major announcements of late. Abhishek Lodha announced 20,000 crore. He's parked a quarter of his shares separately for philanthropy. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala in his lifetime had said, a quarter of his wealth will go to philanthropy. Several Indians have signed the Giving Pledge. Nandan and Rohini, Kiran Mazumdar, others, where they're giving away half their wealth. The Torrent family announced 5,000 crore. So this is huge numbers, which we never saw before. A second is, in some sectors, it's become the norm. So I would say if you look at like the IT sector, thanks to Mr. Premji, Shiv Nadar, Infosys founders, I can't think of a single IT entrepreneur who now doesn't think of philanthropy. If you look at the Mindtree founders, how generous they have been after, exiting their company to L&T, and many others. So it's become the norm. And I think in other areas, it will become the norm over time. A third is that people are starting to give much earlier, especially these young entrepreneurs. People like the Kamath brothers, Dipinder Goyal. I mean, these new age entrepreneurs, they are not waiting till they are 50, 60, 70 to give. They are doing it while they're in their 30s, So I think they believe that giving sooner, starting on the journey earlier is very important. And this is not just a big ticket. I see it amongst younger people. Even if they don't have a huge amount of money, they want to start doing things early. They're not waiting to accumulate a huge nest egg before starting to give away. I think a fourth one is that there is a general sort of mass retail movement as well. It's much more democratized. You don't have to give huge amounts. Thanks to the internet, thanks to retail fundraising, you can give 1,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, a lakh, whatever it may be. So it's become much more democratized. And a fifth is that there's still a huge number of people who are yet to start on the journey. So we did a survey, for instance, of UHNIs along with BCG, accelerating the AIP and BCG. And we found that about 90% of people said they'd like to do more, but the gap that they have is an information gap and a trust gap. And if those could be solved, their giving could be increased.
So Ashish, I think the first question, the first answer itself has, you rightly highlighted, giving young is becoming the trend. We see that with so many of our clients where they are thinking of giving during their lifetime and not leaving it by way of a testamentary will. Okay, so that's something which we also have seen with a lot of our clients. Yet to start is again a very critical thing that we see. People keep saying that we want to do it. So whether it's the time or it's the money, I think sooner you start, the better it gets, because you are able to kind of make that change, decide it for yourself. And I think, Ashish, you may want to agree, or maybe you have a different view. It is not necessary that each one of us who wants to give starts our own charitable trust or a company. There are enough, and that's where the trust factor comes in. That how do I trust the institution that I'm giving the money to? So while I want to kind of delve upon some other questions, but if I were to just harp upon the trust factor, is there any method where a person can decide an organization and have the complete faith, like we have in our stock exchanges today and the listed companies today, in the context of a philanthropic organization?
Yeah, so this is a very good point you made. Even I, when I was younger, I started when I was 30 years old, really giving in the form of checks, to nonprofits. I didn't have my own foundation at that time. And I found some good ones, some large, like Pratham, which was, young organizations at that time. And some were small, community-based, around the issues I cared about. But the way I found them was really through my own personal networks. I went and met them and stuff. Now I think the sector is a bit more organized. So one of the initiatives we started is called Accelerate India Philanthropy. And I partnered with Rohini Nilekani, Amit Chandra, and many others. Now we have 40 founders. And the idea, what we have done there is we have curated about 1,300 nonprofits, where instead of doing the due diligence ourselves, we said the due diligence has been done by some reputed donor already. So say the Nilekanis have already done the due diligence through their team, or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or some other large trust. And so if someone now wants to find an org that is reputable, where the due diligence has been done by at least one or two reputable donors, we have that list available, and it's tagged by domain, by geography. So if somebody says, I want to give to education in Gujarat, we can show them the list of organizations where that's possible. So we have the data now, and we keep growing this list over time.
Interesting. So Accelerate India Philanthropy, that the entity that you run, in that you're saying that the curation has happened of all the philanthropic across.
Yeah. And Gautami, it's a pro bono service. So we don't charge anybody anything. And we work one-on-one with folks who have a desire, because we felt that there was this information gap and trust gap. So information where somebody comes and says, listen, I'm interested in sports or mental health. Just do the landscape analysis for them, show them the organizations that are there, etc. Because people don't have a staff member at that point in time. So we're like the outsourced team doing it. And then also the trust factor saying, show me the NGOs that have been vetted that I can go to. Or can I talk to 3 other philanthropists who've already been giving in this space, so I can learn from their mistakes and not replicate them? So that's the kind of thing that they do.
Sure. So going forward, Ashish, the concept of effective altruism has gained significant traction in the recent years, emphasizing the use of evidence and reason to determine the most effective ways to benefit others. How do you see the principle of effective altruism being applied within the Indian philanthropic landscape? And do you see any challenges and opportunities in adopting this approach in the context of India?
So I think the principle of effective altruism, as you pointed out, Gautami, was to make philanthropy more evidence-based and also a sort of, value or cost to value equation, basically. And to say, look, these things are really cost effective and actually lead to some outcomes. So I think in some areas it's worked well. Let me give you an example. For instance, in order to fight malaria, what researchers found was that in poor countries, in Africa, or even in some parts of India like Bihar, simply giving people bed nets made a huge difference because they could sleep at night and the bed nets protected them from mosquito, and that prevented malaria. And the evidence was very strong, and bed nets were very cheap to give. So this effective altruism movement basically put a spotlight on this, showed the evidence, took it wide, saying this is huge ROI, because that's what research showed. Eventually, 200 million bed nets were funded, and about 150,000 lives were saved in the process. Huge win. I'll give you another example of, when Nandan Nilekani worked on Aadhaar, one of the ideas he had was one use case would be DBT. And obviously, when Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister, he smelled this opportunity and essentially tested it out with a few schemes, 20 plus schemes. Initially, I think 27 schemes. And now 300 plus government schemes use DBT. Something like 7 lakh crore is disbursed every year. And there's a huge saving. We've had savings of over 3 lakh crore thanks to DBT. Huge at scale. Again, it was proven that, if you using this technology, you can identify the beneficiary because you have Aadhaar, and the middleman is cut out, right? And so once you've got it proven, you can take it to scale. And now government has so much trust. Anytime they have to send money directly to beneficiaries, they do it through DBT, right? The challenges of this are that not everything can be put into a cost-benefit equation scientifically, So that's one challenge. And two is sometimes the highest ROI has not been measured. You don't know it. Like, for instance, what is measured is typically subject to a randomized controlled trial or some experiment. Some things you can't experiment with, right? But yet they have huge outcomes. So I think those areas, the other challenge sometimes is you become too focused on point solutions. Like, I know the Gates Foundation now, Bill is working on, he wants to eradicate malaria. He's working on gene drive, right, which itself will re-engineer the mosquito so it solves malaria once and for all. Because malaria still kills 1 million infants per year. Now, that would be a huge upstream solution, which bed nets may solve for some of the problem, but they don't take away the mosquito problem, right?
Correct.
So there are some downsides, but it has been very effective in certain areas also. But I think the broader message is that we should look at evidence before we give money. We should look at evidence before we advocate for policy change. And government also should look at evidence before it spends a lot of money behind something.
So basically, treat it like a PNL.
Yeah, I think, look, even in the corporate world, we do a lot of beta testing, right? To see what
Correct.
works. And then when something works is only when you scale it. Startups call it product market fit. It's the same concept basically here. So why would you, I'll give you another example. I set up Central Square Foundation to work in school education. There was a lot of noise around EdTech. But when we looked at the research on EdTech, we found very spotty evidence that EdTech actually worked. And so we said, as opposed to scaling, let us first see what works. So we set up an EdTech lab and got a lot of products evaluated through it with low-income beneficiaries. We said we don't want to work with India 1, India 2, we want to work with India 3. We, in fact, even reached out to Byju's, and Byju's didn't want to get tested. But my hunch was that Byju's was a product that actually didn't deliver great outcomes, but they were tom-tomming it and going to scale. So this is sometimes the danger or perverse effect. If you go to scale when something is unproven, you can do a disservice.
Got it. So it's important to kind of evaluate your own ideas, test it, and then kind of go all out to kind of promote them or contribute money into that
sometimes government
space.
Also is in a rush, or we are in a rush to scale. Or sometimes in philanthropy, we believe that what we are doing is God's work, it's the best thing ever, and it should be taken to scale. But I really think we should stop, build the evidence before we go to scale, because otherwise we could be wasting money, or sometimes we could be causing harm also.
Okay. Noted. So now, with this background, a lot of people think through what is the cause? How do they choose a cause? It's a challenging decision, right, for many. So could you share your insights on how can one effectively identify a cause that aligns to their values and goals? Additionally, what are some effective ways or structures? So when I mean structures and ways, would you necessarily do a foundation? Would you do a trust? Would you do a Section 8? Would you do just cut checks out and not do it yourself? If you can share your ideas on thoughts on this, please.
Yeah. So firstly, I think in terms of areas, I'm a believer that follow your passion. That's the most important. If you have a passion, like I'll give you my own example. I was very passionate about education. Now, I was passionate about education because when I was young, when I was in school, I had the dream of being a maths teacher myself. My mother said, no way, you have to pursue a career where you can make some money and, be more productive or whatever. And so but it was always in me. I had this thing. And I also know that education makes a huge difference in people's lives. And it's intergenerational. Once you educate a family, their children get educated, it perpetuates.
Absolutely.
So I was a believer. And so I just said, I have to do something there. Now the question was what? I also did from personal experience. I went to Yale undergrad, straight from school in Calcutta. So I had experienced a different form of education in the US, which was interdisciplinary. You had a lot of choice, freedom. In India, we were putting students in a straitjacket. And that's where, and Sanjeev Bikhchandani, my partner, had been to St. Stephen's, and he felt that Stephen's was going downhill, and his own daughter was going to Columbia. And so we came together and said, we must start a new kind of institution. It was born out of personal experience. It was born out of a need where India was following a certain path that was too restrictive. And the 21st century, we needed a learner who could think for themselves, who could be exposed to different disciplines, who could communicate well, etc. So there was a need and there was a felt experience. And basis that we started. Same thing with Central Square Foundation. I felt school education is critical. We looked at the data. We said learning breaks down early. By class 3, more than half our children are not able to read. And third grade is the most important grade because you switch from learning to read to reading to learn. If you can't read, you miss the curriculum afterwards. You can't transact the curriculum. So we said we have to work on this area. But it came from passion, and then there was a need, and it was an important area to work on. So I think if you have passion, pursue it, and then find within that passion space, where does the data point you to? What's really important in that space. If you don't have passion about a particular area, then I would say pick a neglected space. Because everybody picks these areas which are already quite well funded. Then if you know one area, you're undecided, then may as well go where nowhere else is going. Right? There's very little money there. Your money will go much further in terms of, someone may say, nobody is funding conservation of historical monuments. I want to do that, So do that then, because you will make a bigger impact. You'll be the first one doing it, etc. In terms of structure, I think initially when one is learning, it may be better to start with grant making. It's just easier. You don't have to set up a structure. You don't have to hire staff. You learn from your partners almost. So I started on that journey. I made lots of grants, my first between age 30 and 43, before I quit my job and went full time. And I tell you, I'm so grateful I didn't start with my own foundation in the beginning, because I went through a great learning journey by talking to the people I'd given money to, seeing what they're doing, seeing what I could be doing better, seeing what I liked, didn't like. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't get too deeply invested, because with a grant, you can switch it off. You can make a grant commitment for 1 year, 3 years, whatever. You have more flexibility, and you don't get invested in a particular team. Once you have a team, they will then get invested in the idea, etc. So I feel my personal experience has been, it's better to start with grant giving with good partners, figure out then what you want to do. Once you're at a certain stage where you're willing to give a little bit more time, also significantly more money, then it's worth actually setting up your own structure, maybe getting a team member on board, and then getting going on that journey.
So, very interesting thoughts. And you said that I think you said 43 when you actually started the foundation, right? So, just asking this question, what made you kind of leave such a fantastic career that you were leading and get into philanthropy? You actually left that and started this whole time, right?
So, Gautami, I was very lucky. I started Chris Capital when I was 30 years old. Private equity is a very lucrative business, and we did well. So I made more money than I could ever imagine. And I had I wouldn't say a limit, but I felt enough was enough. And I had a certain passion to have a second career where I could drive impact. So financially, I was very well off. Honestly, I didn't need more money. I could live very well. So zero impact on the family, on lifestyle. And I had enough of a surplus to start giving away. And honestly, it's been the best decision ever, because one is the joy you get from giving is unmatched. It's almost spiritual. It makes you a better person, I think. And two is it's very different from the business world. You learn a lot from the business world you can apply, but you also start to realize that socioeconomic problems are very complex and they're challenging in their own way. So they engage you intellectually and emotionally. And as a career, or even in terms of even if you're doing it part-time, the learning that comes from it also is very gratifying.
So, so that's something that's like a message to all of us here who work 24/7. If I were to say, to kind of take a step back and think through what we are doing in our lives, and maybe try and make some change in the entire world.
Yeah,
And
and Gautami, generally, I'm a very scientific person, very rational person. But honestly, I somehow believe that the more you give, the luckier you get. I mean, I've been very lucky with my investments. Now, I can't correlate it to my giving, but honestly, it's I just think it makes you lucky. Good luck is showered on you as well.
Okay. So going to the next question, Ashish, with your experience in the investment landscape, you've done private equity as a profession, and then you investments for your personal funds as well. Could you share some insights on how Indian families should leverage their resources to drive social impact? And if you can give some examples in this context, because it's social impact, sustainability, all this is also important. People create ESG funds. It's a word used. Does that lead to anything? Should families think differently? Any thoughts on this piece?
See, firstly, I think all families who have created wealth, in a way, have done a lot for the society. I'm a big believer that business is a force for good. Through your business, you create jobs, you create a product that is useful to society. So in and of itself, you're already, as an entrepreneur, as a wealth creator, you're doing a lot for society. But I think we can do much more, particularly for the bottom half of society. And so for families, at least I feel for us who are lucky, we've done well, it behooves on us. It's almost a responsibility, a weight on our shoulders to do something, and to develop a social conscience, to do something for those who are left behind. Not because they're lazy, but because they never had the opportunity, right? And I think there, there's so many areas to work on, Gautami. I think that CSR is something people start with. And I think it's very good that the government, initially, I know companies were kicking and screaming, saying, what is this? But the good news is government did it alongside reducing corporate tax. So this was a small additional tax. On a net basis, you were still better off, right? But it was a tax in your hands, and you could decide how to allocate it. And I think a lot of people, I find, have learned to do, initially, they were doing some random things, but I find CSR has gotten so much smarter over the years. And many of my friends who run companies now are saying, I've done CSR, but now I also have personal wealth, right? I'm liquidating some of my personal wealth, or I'll gift my shares, and I'll also do personal, because this I have to do. Personal is at my option. It's giving up, because I'm also a trustee of my own wealth, right? So a lot of people, I think first-gen entrepreneurs are asking the question, how much money do I need for myself? How much money do I want to give my kids? Or equity holding do I want to give my kids? Or how much equity holding do I need to secure the company, control of my company for the long term, beyond my own lifetime? And the rest of it, can I allocate to doing greater good for society? So that's a mindset change that we've seen, in the last 10 years.
So Ashish, in this space, there's a lot of collaborative work that one can do, and partnerships between private sector, government, non-profits, whereby you can enhance your impact in the initiatives that you're taking. Could you share some successful examples in this context, which you have seen whilst running Ashoka, or generically as well?
Yeah. No, so I'll use the Ashoka example because it's a good example of collaborative philanthropy. It's actually, I believe, the largest collaborative philanthropy project in the country, because we have raised 3,500 crore through Ashoka. So Ashoka started as a dream where Sanjeev Bikhchandani, who is the founder of InfoEdge, Naukri, and I came together. We both committed 250 crore each to get the institution started. And, we didn't know where this would go, but we also put in our time. We got Dr. Pramatraj Sinha, who is the founding dean of ISB, included into the project as a co-founder. And we started with the principle that none of us would take control of the institution. Our families would not get involved. It would be completely professional. And that our board, we would only have one vote each. So even somebody who gives a much lesser amount could be on the board alongside us. We wanted to democratize the institution from day one. So I think when you do a collaborative project, the first thing is you can't have your name on the door. You have to also, you can't have voting control. You have to allow others to participate, to hear their voice, etc. Operationally, I was spending a lot of time. So obviously, a lot of decisions I was making, but I had to do it in a manner where it was collaborative. To me, it was the best thing because it was a great way to get a lot of friends involved in the journey. Some of the early people who got involved were Amit Chandra from Bombay, Puneet Dalmia, who's my good friend from Delhi, Rakesh Junjunwala from Bombay, Deep Kalra, who started Make My Trip. Very, very good people. And people who were really very smart, people we could learn from, benefit from early on. So, and the way we built Ashoka is we started by buying land. We started the project slowly. And then we became a university in 2014. Today, we have 3,000 plus students. We get applications from almost 500 towns and cities across India and 40 countries outside India, Gautami. Half our students are on financial aid. We can now afford to give about 100 crore in scholarships every year. And we are scaling up PhD, science, computer science, all this. So it's become a big institution. And, our dream was to build a world-class institution, not just best in India. So now 10 years, we built a foundation. So much like in business, when you have ambition, goals, a vision, KPIs, we operate the same way. And we've said, now we've reached a certain stage. How do we do 3x this, in the next decade and improve the quality even further? And for that, we need to raise another 5,000 crore. over this period of time. So it's an ambition. We're not operating a small NGO. It's a big project to create a world-class institution. That requires resources, it requires talent, it requires partnerships to go make it happen. And if one person had written the check, yes, the institution could have been built. But the power of so many people contributing, we have 200 founders and 250 donors, is you get the energy of multiple people who can help in so many different areas. And you also get, in a way, an institution that can become sustainable. The world's best universities, they have no founder or person who controls them. Harvard, Stanford, there may be a gift from somebody in the beginning, but today there's no family that controls any one of the top 200 universities. All are non-profit. So we said that is the best model if you want to endure.
I've experienced this when children want to go and study abroad in the US universities. I have seen them apply to Ashoka at the same stance. And that's a very proud feeling that you're comparing Ashoka to something outside India, where people have only taken the plunge to go to US. People are looking at Ashoka as well. It's a great thing to see. And I think you've created something really beautiful and really big in a way.
Gautami, I must tell you, this year, we finished 10 years. It shocked me that we had this year students who've turned down Berkeley, Duke, Urbana-Champaign, London School of Economics to come to Ashoka. We never thought this would happen when we started, but it's happening now.
So one could say Ashoka is like the Harvard of India.
We hope. I still think a long ways to go. It'll require at least 15 years of hard work to become world-class. It's a good beginning, but we have to improve on many fronts and also scale.
So this has been a very enriching session here, Ashish, and thanks really for taking the time out. We will now open up for questions, and people could type it in the windows and we can read, and Ashish can answer some of them. I already saw 2 questions. So there's a question from Shashank. What are some of the global trends in philanthropy that you see coming to India in the next few years?
Yeah, I think global trends, big one is sort of system change or systemic philanthropy. So I think globally what people realize is that you can do your own thing, but you can't scale or sustain long term. I think what they realize, like if I look at the Gates Foundation, I'm on the board of the Gates Foundation, they give away $9 billion a year. But Bill Gates often says that even $9 billion is nothing compared to what government spends. Right? So if you look at the case of India, government spends about $350 billion a year on the social sector, 9% of GDP. In education alone, government spends almost 8 lakh crore. So what is philanthropy in the context of government? It's the drop in the bucket. So what systemic philanthropy says is that, look, my job is to make government more effective. What's the best way to do it? What can government do and what can't government do? Generally, government is such a behemoth, it can't innovate. So one of the things you can do outside is you can come up with a new method. Like we at Central Square Foundation found that globally, one method that had worked in low and middle income countries was structured pedagogy. We piloted it in 4 districts, right? And we showed evidence. We also got rigorous researchers to show evidence that this worked, right? So first we had to do it as a pilot, show the evidence. We got permission from those districts, made it happen. Once there was strong evidence, we went and advocated. So we went and convinced 3 chief ministers to make it into state missions. Eventually, the Prime Minister made it a national mission. And it's been running for 2.5 years as a national mission. We then scaled to 11 states to work with government to support Nipun Bharat. So this is system change philanthropy, where we are working inside the Department of Education to help the government implement its own mission. The reason this is very high ROI is government is already spending the money. What we bring to the table is project management, technical expertise, but we are not paying for the printing of workbooks, printing of teacher guides, teacher training, infrastructure. Government pays for all of that. So I think this is a big thing globally that has happened because philanthropists have realized that if you start a program either it'll be too small in their backyard, or even if they scale, it'll scale to 100,000 children. 50, it can't scale to the whole system, and it won't be sustainable. The project will eventually fizzle out. So working with the system is the best way to get scale and sustainability. So that, I think, is a mega trend that we're seeing. And in India, if you look at Ajay Piramal, the Piramal Foundation, they started more project-based. They have pivoted now. Ajay himself talks about system change and how proud he is of what they're doing, say, in aspirational districts with the government. Tata Trust used to make hundreds of grants. Now you see Tata Trust working with state governments on solving malnutrition with state governments. So we see some of the big ones in India also, including some CSR, start to do this. But this is, I think, the big trend that will come to India.
So basically, this is similar to the collaborative effort that we spoke about. One person doing it versus collaborating it with multiple philanthropists.
And in this case, collaborating with government. It could be multiple people, but collaborating with government. Yeah.
Sure. So somebody has asked this question: having done and accomplished so much, what would you do differently going forward?
It's a good question. I've been thinking about it myself. So one of the things when I spent about 10 years in education, I'm very passionate about it, as I said earlier. One of my realizations was that, the thing that's most important is economic growth. At the end of the day, if you look at GDP per capita, it solves for everything. It lifts, if you raise your GDP per capita, if India's GDP per capita goes from $2,800 per person to $10,000 per person, or $15,000, which the Prime Minister has said he wants, Viksit Bharat, you will reduce poverty, you will improve healthcare, you will improve education. Everything. There's a 90% correlation between economic growth and human development. So this was a realization that came on to me more recently. And now I have pivoted some of my philanthropy to actually work on economic growth, which is very contrarian, because most people say, what will you do in philanthropy for economic growth? But we have started doing a lot of work on areas that are important for the government, like labor-intensive exports, where India is losing out to Vietnam, or infrastructure policy, particularly for urban areas related to land and urban development. So we set up 6 new foundations that work on economic growth, policy implementation. So this is something that we started working on. And we want to scale this to about 20, 30 institutions in the next decade, because of my realization that economic growth trumps everything.
Interesting. And you see any other philanthropy looking at this same aspect?
So it's just starting, I would say. Look, most people would still prefer to give to health, education, environment, livelihoods. This is it's a smaller universe of people who feel this is a bit more technical, it's less grassroots, it's more policy, etc. But we do see, in fact, now we have decided to allocate from Convergence Foundation 400 crore towards this, and we're building a collaborative of 1,200 crore. The money won't come to us. It'll go to the organizations we help create. And we've already just had a few conversations in the last month, and 3 people signed up for 50 crore each. So we are seeing now that people have an interest, but it's a certain type of individual. It's not for everyone, I would say.
Sure, correct. Another question, and I think I can take that as a last question. How to strike a balance between immediate community needs and long-term solving of societal issues?
Yeah, so look, I'm a big believer, and I think this is very much a personal thing. I'm a big believer that let's get to the root cause and work on the most important problem, however complicated it may be, as long as it's a tractable, as long as it's a solvable problem. So, for instance, let me just start with education, which I know reasonably well. When we look at why children are not learning in schools, India has some great institutions like the IITs and great CEOs who come out who've gone global. But yet, why is it that we do so poorly on World Bank indicators where 55% of children by class 5 can't read third grade text? So our bottom half is left behind forever. They don't have equal opportunity, which is what we want them to have. Mm-hmm. So we said the way to solve for this is really to go, if you have a leaky pipe, you always go upstream to fix it, right? Go to the root cause, which is really in early childhood education and early grades. There were solutions, right, to work on this. So it's tractable, it's doable. There is now government is starting to focus on this area. We had to do a lot of work, government's focusing. It is a problem very hard to solve because even though you can provide the technical tools, the budgets, ultimately the change comes if the teacher changes the classroom transaction, which is a behavior change process. It's not a technical, it's not like a vaccine, which one vaccine jab will solve the problem. So it's a very difficult, complex change problem. And so it will take years to work on. I mean, when we set up Central Square Foundation, we said it's a 20-year journey. We will see markers along the way, every year, every 5 years, but you have to be committed to this for 15 years, 20 years. To really get India to be at a developed world level will take a long, long period of time. So I'm a big believer that let's get to the root cause, let's work on the harder problems and be committed. As a philanthropist, then you also have to be committed to it for a long period of time. You can't shift gears and shift around too much.
Okay, so I think we will end the session now. Thank you, Ashish, for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us today. We appreciate your guidance on identifying impactful causes, strategic philanthropic approaches, and the most important point on collaboration and partnerships. I think one thing is very clear, that you have to have passion. You have to believe in the cause that you have chosen. You have to give it some time. You can't just say that it will change. I've given 5 years now, I don't see any change, so I can't stop, because you have to give it enough time for it to percolate down and for you to reap the benefits, or for you to see the benefits being reaped. And that's a learning. I think giving early is something which all of us should adopt, including people here at Kotak. We should adopt in some manner, whether it's time or money, whatever it is. And we have been highlighting this to our clients as well. So thanks for all the informative guidance given to us. Thank you.
Gautami, you said it better than me. Next time you don't meet me.
Did I? I don't think
I forgot one thing, if I could say. I think the one mistake I made when I started is I didn't involve my spouse as much. And later she got involved, and it's been a lot of fun also to be able to work together with one's spouse in the journey also. Now she wants to do somewhat different things than me, philanthropically, but we still go to the same office, we work together. So it's a lot of fun, I think, from a family standpoint, or also brings you closer together. In fact, I remember meeting your daughter, and she is doing something on her own as well. Yes. So yes. If one thought to the audience... She went to Ashoka, so she's a product of what we started. So I'm just saying that, we do a lot of discussions in the context of family business and family business succession. I think this is one chord which will get you close, and the values that you build together in this space will help you kind of perpetuate your businesses as well. And that's something which all of us should think about and kind of try and see whether we can practice this. In fact, I remember one very large business family promoter had told me once that you don't really... So for example, you create a big business and you created like a $1 billion valuation. People in the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 10 generations don't remember that family because of the P&L that they created or the valuation that they got. They will remember them for the work that they did in the context of philanthropy. And it was amply explained with an example, which I'm not giving here, but I think that's something which we should keep in mind and work towards creating that legacy in the context of philanthropy. That's something which I think... it's a great point. I mean, if you look at it, Andrew Carnegie was a great businessman and then became a great philanthropist. Nobody knows Andrew Carnegie's business anymore, but Carnegie Mellon University the National Bureau of Economic Research, all the things he started are still around. The philanthropic institutions, more than the business.
Like the Rockefeller, right? We remember the center and the foundation. We don't remember what businesses they did.
Yeah, and there's a university also, Rockefeller University.
Yes.
And University of Chicago was set up by them.
Wow, see. So I'm just saying people don't remember you for the businesses and the valuations that you created, but they remember you for generations for the philanthropic work that you did. And that's something which we always tell our clients that we should kind of, inculcate in the next generations as well. So I think thank you to everybody for attending and having a participation in this. We hope this session has inspired all of you deeply, and you all will start your own philanthropic journeys and find ways to contribute either by giving grants or by giving time or creating your own institutions. Thank you, everybody. And we will keep doing more interesting sessions from Kotak Alternate Asset Managers. Ashish will invite you as well for some of our sessions. We hope that you attend and also we participate together in some other sessions that we do at Kotak's.
Thank you for having me, Gautami.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.